Today's video is going through all of the Christian fiction that I read in 2023. There ended up being 35, so that is about a third of the books that I read last year were Christian fiction. There was a few hits that I really loved, and there was a few that I really didn't like, and a bunch in the middle. Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Haley, and I review a variety of books, Christian fiction, classics, non-fiction, but all of it from a Christian perspective. I'm also an ACBC counselor, so I look at Christian books especially through the lens of being a biblical counselor and what do they teach on dealing with your sin and on looking to Christ. So that's the lens that I view especially Christian fiction through. So I'm going to go through, we're going to start out with the terrible ones I would not recommend, and then we'll move up to my favorites at the end of the video. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. And as always, all the links to all of the books that I am going to mention are going to be in the description below. So without further ado, let's jump into the books that I did not like last year. Starting out with The Lost Melody. This was my first book of the year, and I definitely did not like this one at all. I think it just had a really confusing storyline. Some of the things were interesting to me, but it just didn't wrap up well, and the plot was not well done. Also, When I Close My Eyes by Elizabeth Musser. I've liked a lot of her books, but this one just had a very psychological worldview and kind of was about suicide and just dealt with topics like that in a way that I did not agree with, so I didn't like this one. Set the Stars Alight by Amanda Dykes. Again, I like a lot of her other books. This one, though, it was just 3 stars. The ending was really disappointing, and it wrapped up way too quickly. I even talked to other people, and a lot of people don't understand what happened at the end of the book. Some of the characters I liked, but just the storyline itself was kind of predictable and cliche. Then another one I did not like is Before I Called You Mine. I believe this one's by Nicole Deese. This one was an adoption one, and just the worldview I really didn't like, and there was nothing special that stood out about it. Then The Promised Land by Elizabeth Musser. This is book 3 of the Swan House series. I liked the other ones. This one, however, had a lot of psychology in it, and just wasn't as intriguing of a storyline. Then Crossfire by Lynette Eason. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with this one, but Lynette Eason books are just very I guess like light and fluffy. There's nothing special or memorable about it. So if you are looking for some kind of like thriller Christian fiction, maybe you might read these, but I have some other recommendations for that kind of book, and none of her books ever stick around in my mind. Then Shadowcatcher by James Hannibal. Absolutely love all of his other books. This one, though, just fell flat for me simply because the topic and the details for like a fighter pilot and things like that just weren't necessarily my interest. But if that is something that you like, you might enjoy this. I gave this to someone at church, and they really enjoyed reading it, so it just wasn't my thing. Then The Curse of Misty Wayfair by Jamie Jo Wright. I really liked one of her other books, but this one I didn't like. Again, there was a lot of psychology. I did a whole video ranting about it, so I'll link that and you can go watch that. Now and Then and Always. This one, first of all, I listened to it, and the audiobook was terrible. The narrator was so bad, and it was just a very Hallmark cliche storyline, and there was a lot of things that I wouldn't agree with doing, and that it just didn't really feel Christian at all. Sunburst, this is book 2 in the Sky King Ranch series. I'll get to book 1 in a minute, but I just didn't really like this one at all, and it was the whole plot line of kind of a marriage of convenience trope with the one bed trope, and it was just weird, and it definitely wasn't as clean as the first one, so I didn't like that one. For Such a Time by Kate Breslin. I also did a video on this, you can go look, but basically someone falls in love with a Nazi who isn't really showing any signs of repentance at all, and so I just think that's a really weird storyline, and I didn't like how it went. And then To Spark a Match, this is number 2 of the Matchmaker series. I really liked number 1, but this one just felt kind of lame. I only gave it 3 stars. It wasn't terrible, it just wasn't one that I would be recommending to people a lot. And then Dear Henry, Love Edith. This one started out really funny, and there's a lot of scenes that I still remember, but it was not clean. I feel like there was a lot of innuendo and very little Christianity in it, so not one I would recommend as Christian fiction. Alright, and then the ones that I kind of liked but didn't necessarily hit favorite level, but I would still recommend. The Sweetest Thing by Elizabeth Musser. This one's about the Great Depression. She's living in the South during the Great Depression, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. It has a really sweet love story. It is sad, and there are some really great lessons and perspective in here for a believer. However, it does fall flat for an unbeliever, just because it's definitely the storyline of bad things push you to Christ, and then you, like, he's just the remedy for bad things happening, which again is really good for a believer, but for an unbeliever, there was no mention of sin or anything like that. However, I really like this book if you like storylines about the 1930s. Fifth Avenue Story Society by Rachel Hawk. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This one was a big surprise to me. I actually didn't know that it was Christian fiction, so that helped my rating be a little bit higher because I was less critical as I was reading through it. It's just a really sweet storyline, memorable characters. There is some content and some implied intimacy, and each of the characters have their own rough past. So there are things mentioned in here, but I thought that the Christianity, while light, was well done, especially for a book that I wasn't expecting to be Christian. And then The Nature of Small Birds by Susie Finkbeiner. I only gave this one 3 stars. However, it ended up being just very memorable for me. I still remember a lot of the things that I learned about adoption from Vietnam and like I think the 1970s. And it's written just in a memoir style. It's more character driven as opposed to plot driven. So I think that's part of the reason I didn't necessarily like it, but it stuck around. A Match in the Making. This is number 1 in the Matchmakers series. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. It was a very lighthearted rom-com about a widower and a matchmaker, and the widower has a few kids. So there's just like a lot of funny scenes in there. And I thought if you are looking for something that's just really light and fluffy, this is a really good way to go. Dan the Librarian of Boone's Hollow. This one I ended up giving 4 stars, and I thought it was a pretty good frontier librarian story. I still remember bits and pieces of the story. There was some romance in there, but I don't think it was too heavy. Then Anomaly by Krista McGee. I gave this 3 stars, and it was very meh to me personally. It was very dystopian, Maze Runner type storyline, but I feel like I've read and watched a lot of those storylines, and so this felt a little redundant to me. But if you are looking for one that is clean, I would definitely recommend that you pick this one up. The Dwelling Place, that's number 2 in the Swan House series by Elizabeth Musser. I gave this one 4 stars. I think this one had a really sweet storyline of a daughter's heart softening to her mother and just to people who are struggling with things, and then also softening towards God. I thought that she did that aspect really well. There is some content in here, but you can see my Goodreads reviews to see more details on that. The Waterkeeper by Charles Martin. I gave this one 3 stars. The story is about human trafficking, and so it is a very heavy book. As all of Charles Martin's books are, there is content in there, but he deals with it in a really, I think, a good way, and there's nothing explicit. Just know that the entire story does revolve around human trafficking, and it definitely gave me a lot of appreciation for safety and just being aware of things. The Edge of Belonging by Amanda Cox. I actually gave this one 4 stars. I don't remember a ton about it, but it was a sweet story of adoption. It had a pastor's family in there, and it was really clean. Sunrise by Susan May Warren. This is book number 1 in the Sky King Ranch series. I really love this one. This felt like just good Christian romance. I feel like there was some content in here, some things that I wouldn't necessarily agree with doing, but I felt like it was really well written. I was really invested. There was a lot of forgiveness in here. So if you are looking for a contemporary romance book that is mostly clean, I would recommend this one, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Then Authentically Izzy and Positively Penelope by Pepper Basham. This is the Schemar series. I think I gave both of them 3, maybe 4 stars. They're written through letters, so and text and emails, so I really enjoyed that aspect of the story, and there was a lot of sweet things in there, particularly in Positively Penelope. I liked a lot of the references to theater and movies. Authentically Izzy has a lot of references to books and stuff, so I thought it was sweet, but there was very little Christianity, and I didn't particularly like the romance aspect of it. Okay, and then let's talk about all of my favorites from last year. So a lot of them are series, so it'll feel like there's a lot in the favorites, but some of them, only the first one of the series was my favorite. So starting out with When Crickets Cry by Charles Martin. I believe I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I think a lot about the things I learned from it, about being a heart doctor, and some of the things in there. There is a fair bit of content that I marked up. I think the pink is content. Again, like I said about Charles Martin, there's always going to be some content, and they're going to be heavier books, but this one, it just was gut-wrenching. It definitely made you cry a lot, and I think I would recommend it if you're okay with some of the stuff that's in there. Then The Reckoning at Gossamer Pond by Jamie Jo Wright, I ended up giving this one 5 stars. It just felt like the perfect romantic suspense. There was a lot of forgiveness in here. They even mentioned sin. I really liked the characters and was invested in the relationships. There is a lot of mentions of infidelity, adultery, things like that, because the entire family basically is smeared by that in different generations, but I felt like there wasn't anything explicit in there, and I really enjoyed this book. All Manner of Things by Susie Finkbeiner. This one is definitely a 5 star. You must read this. I've already pressed it into so many people's hands, and this one is just the story of a family during the Vietnam War and just living in a small town and people going off to war and writing letters, and it's really just the family relationship in here you'll absolutely love, and you'll feel like you're part of the family. I would highly recommend this one. Then this whole series, Calculated, Activated, and Simulated. This one is definitely my favorite. This was a 5 stars. The other 2 were 4 stars for me. This is the story of a child prodigy who's really good at math. And this one, she's in China, and then one of them takes place, I think, in Finland, and the other one's in Tunisia. It's just really interesting. All the characters are really well done, and I feel like it's on the level of like Harry Potter and those like cult favorite books. I really wish there was more people who had read this one, and there actually is movies coming out, so I'm really excited for that. Highly recommend this book. Elysium Tide by James Hannibal. I love this one. This was a doctor in Hawaii solving a crime. I wish that there was more romance and that the ending had been a little bit better. I think there's supposed to be a second book, but it's not out yet. I really enjoyed just everything about Hawaii. I love, and reading this was so fun, and James Hannibal writes amazingly clean books, so highly recommend this one. And then another one by his that I really liked was The Paris Betrayal. I gave this one 5 stars. This one is kind of biblical allegory, but you might not notice it, and that's okay. You can still enjoy it with or without the allegory. This one is a suspense book, but I would say it's about like a bioweapon and this guy who is traveling around the world, but everything is going wrong. So if you don't like depressing books where like everything's going wrong and there's a lot of violence, then maybe don't pick this one up. But I really enjoyed it. It definitely kept you on the edge of your seat and kept you reading because you knew that it had to go right at some point. So I really enjoyed this one. All right, then The Star-Lord Legacy by Chuck Black. Nova particularly, I gave 5 stars. This one was a little more boring to me, but these are Christian sci-fi that are clean, slightly allegorical, and I think sci-fi is just really a genre that we don't have a lot of Christian clean books in. So if your kids are interested in this, especially teenage boys, my brother has read the entire series so far and loves it. I would definitely recommend picking this up if sci-fi is your thing. And then one more that I listened to was Until Leaves Fall in Paris by Sarah Sundin. I really loved that one and gave it 5 stars. I think I was crying going through the grocery store listening to it. It does have some time jumps in it, but I just really enjoy Sarah Sundin's writing and the historical aspect of it. And there was a little bit of faith content in there. So hopefully I didn't miss any, but those are all of my thoughts on the 35 Christian fiction books that I read in 2023. I hope you guys get some good recommendations from this video, and I hope you enjoy it because this is the 4th time that I have videoed this. But thank you guys for being here, and I hope that you subscribe to my channel and come back when there are new videos. Bye!